All right. So thanks for tuning in. However, you may be accessing this, YouTube, on the blog. However, this is Dr. Kenyon Meadows, the Invest Doc, and I have a very, very special guest on the show today. We always talk about the goal of early retirement, financial freedom, and I have a guest that not only that has achieved this, but has written a book about it, and was kind enough to have me on his show, and I am returning the favor. This is Michael Zuber, author of One Rental at a Time. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for inviting me. This should be fun.
Yeah, man. In the course of me looking for content on YouTube in the real estate investing space, I just sort of happened upon your channel, and then I binged watched it and loved what you had to say, and and I was fortunate enough to connect with you and get my copy of One Rental at a Time that you were gracious enough to send me, and I think it's a great read. And I think a lot of people would benefit from it. But before we get into the book, man, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how'd you get into real estate investing?
So I'm from California. I live and reside in what's often called the Bay Area. If you're from the Bay Area, I live in specifically Mountain View. Most people know it because Google's just right down the block from where we live.
Hmm.
So definitely Silicon Valley. I've been in tech, or was in tech, for more than a couple of decades. I worked in software sales, pre-sales, direct sales, sales management. And, that kind of career, as you're promoted, you get bigger and bigger numbers, but it also takes you away from your family. I traveled more than 100,000 miles a year on airplanes, spent more than 100 nights away in hotels. And,
Wow.
it's not what I wanted for myself. When you get married, you have a family, you don't, assuming you like them, you don't want to leave. You don't want to do that. But that's kind of how I worked myself into a job to pay the bills.
Right.
And, that was kind of who I was. And then, I was 30 is when my life changed. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It impacted me to sort of wake up and realize that I was spending all my earned income and I was being an idiot.
Mm.
I really got attracted to the idea of a rental property. No one in my family graduated college. I mean, both parents' side, up and down the food chain until myself.
Hmm.
No one had got a master's degree. So I was already, quote unquote, the successful one in my family, but I didn't feel that way because I didn't have anything. I felt like an idiot, frankly. And
Okay.
it was that book that sort of changed my life and said, okay, I got to figure out this rental thing. I got to start living below my means. I got to be conservative, earn, save, invest. And, we started a journey, that, began with one house and ultimately over 15 years had a successful ending. So that's kind of our story.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a ton of people attribute their initial getting their mindset right to Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read it. I think it's great in terms of redefining your relationship to your time, your labor,
Mhm.
and money.
Mhm.
And obviously, real estate is a great way to sort of maximize your and all about buying assets and things that produce income, and that definitely changed the definition for me, and that's one of the focuses behind my channel. I'm always trying to educate folks on what are cash flowing assets, and certainly rental property is the number one thing for me. We got a couple folks that have joined in. Hello, OW, thanks for joining in. SOBC, give a shout out. So we're here visiting with Michael Zuber, author of One Rental at a Time. So not only is Mr. Zuber a real estate investor, he has actually, I think I'm speaking correctly, retired from the corporate 9 to 5 and is living off of rental income. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes, almost 2 years to the day. I retired or left the W-2, the rat race, whatever you want to call it, February 1st
Hmm.
of 2018. So almost 2 years to the date.
Absolutely. That's great. So I obviously I'm jealous. I am not there, and it's not on the immediate horizon. So you're an aspirational spot to be in for me. So The book is available on Amazon here. We have the screen capture there. You see it has over 100 individual ratings, 4.5 stars. So very well reviewed. And, one of the things that I thought that we could do, Mike, is actually go through just a few select passages throughout the book to give people a flavor of what's in it. Do you want to give just a brief overview though, why you decided to write the book in the first place before we jump in?
Yeah. Actually, what I think I'll do is I'll read the dedication page, because this is really, it's only a paragraph. It's like 5 lines, if you don't mind. So I wrote this book for the full-time employees who are looking and hoping for a way out of the rat race. Investing in real estate while holding a demanding full-time job is not easy, but with time and execution, you can establish a better future and financial freedom. I truly hope you enjoy this book and that our story inspires you to embark on your own journey to improve your future. So that's why we wrote a book. That right there.
Shout out to SOBC, who just bought Mike's book off Amazon. Appreciate that. Like I said, I never pitch you guys something that I haven't digested myself. And so it's worth it, definitely. So let us get into first thing here. So why real estate investing? And I think before you get into the X's and O's and strategies and tactics and whatnot, it's very important to have the philosophy of why you get into there. So I can read this, or of course you can read it as your words if you wanted to zone in there. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. I think I'll tell you sort of the story behind the words, right? And really why real estate for me, if you go through the book, is I got to 30. Again, I had a decent income, but had no savings, no wealth. And I knew that I would have a better future if I got to one rental property, and a better future after that. And after that, again, the mindset shift that Robert Kiyosaki brought to me. And that's all it was. I'd be lying to you if I said I had this grand vision of financial independence, right? I grew up in a very poor family where money was a stressor, right? If we had it, everybody was happy. And if we didn't have it, it was very loud and rough. And it was often rough. So money has always been a stressor for me. And I just knew that if I got one, I could do better. So my initial vision was 10. I was like, you know what, if I can get to 10 by the time I'm 40, again, starting when I was 30, life would be better. So for me, it was just, I'm going to get one. It was literally one rental at a time. And then we got a second one. And as you go through the book, you'll see that we were investing before the crash, which is really interesting for folks. A lot of people talking today have been investing the last 5, 6, 7 years. Well, those have been some of the freaking best years ever. I was investing before the crash. I survived the crash and came out of the crash stronger. So the book has it all. But why real estate? It was just that I knew I would have a better future. If I could just get to 10, I thought I'd have it set when I was 60. And that's why.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to hit on, you contrasted doing real estate versus, a business or an invention or like some of these other ways that people, I think, sometimes envision, getting free from their W-2. What was it about real estate in contrast to those other things that you thought was the better route?
Well, in fairness, if you have the skills, if you're well educated and you can invent something perhaps like yourself, right? If you could create a cure for cancer, I mean, we just throw it out there. Why don't you go ahead and do that right away? You could be a billionaire tomorrow, right?
Right.
I was not smart enough. I knew I couldn't sing. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't going to invent the next best Facebook. So I knew for the average Joe, which I consider myself, real estate was kind of my only option. I spent my 30s before I was 30 trying to be Warren Buffett in the stock market. It worked really, really well in an up market, and then I got crushed and lost it all, and then some.
Yeah.
So real estate just felt like I can touch it. It's not as liquid as stocks. It's not as emotionally up or down. It doesn't have true fraud. At least I thought so until we got to the loan fraud of 08, 09.
Right.
I just felt that it was a more even playing field because I wasn't going to do the stock market again, as I talk about in the book, lost lots of money. And I just went all in because I had to do something. I wasn't going to do this sales job, which is high stress. You run in 90-day sales cycles where you could literally be fired for not delivering numbers. And I couldn't do it forever. Even I started at 30 and it's a young man's game. And Thankfully, I was able to get out at 45, and it's all because of real estate.
Okay. Okay. So, yes, that was the path there. You said didn't have the talent or drive to do some of the other stuff.
I know myself, man. It's not me. Nope,
Well,
can't do that. Can't do that.
well, when you look at the Forbes lists and whatnot, the wealthiest people in the world, and certainly when you look at people that have been able to achieve great wealth who don't come from wealthy families and stuff like that, real estate is one of the few things out there where the regular person can amass good wealth without that stuff. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't given anything, right? Both of my parents, one graduated high school, the other didn't. They were both in the military. And money wasn't around. I mean, I literally remember finding a dime once when I was 7 or 8, feeling like I was rich. I mean, that just tells you money just wasn't around. So
right. So let's go to the next passage here. That understanding your goal. Okay, so you decide to go into real estate, and again, was that the explicit thing? Like, hey, I want to replace my W-2 income and live off of this, or was it, hey, I want to flip properties and do that, or I want to mentor and teach people. Like, what was the main thing?
No, I knew that if I could own 10 houses free and clear, because again, I was 30. So for me, I wish I could tell you I had this grand plan all along. I didn't. I knew that if I bought 10 houses over 10 years, and when I got to 60, I would be the most well off of any of my relatives. That was kind of my measuring stick at the time, right? Social media wasn't around. Internet really wasn't around. It was still all books and going to bookstores and real estate meetups and the like. So I didn't have context. Nobody in my family's an entrepreneur. Nobody in my family had made more than 50 grand a year, right? I didn't know what was possible. All I knew is if I bought a house and my tenant paid it off, when I turned 60, I would own something free and clear. And I thought I could live on 10 free and clear houses.
Okay. Yeah.
Obviously accelerates from there, but that's why. That's what I did.
Absolutely. So to get into a little bit of the tactics and the details here, so you decided to jump out there. Number one, how did you decide where to invest, and how did you decide what would be a reasonable price to pay? And in coming through your book, one area where we have a lot of synergy was this 1% rule you have under your rule of thumb thing here. Can you tell the audience what the 1% rule was, how that played a role in where you decided to invest, and what type of properties you decided to invest in?
Absolutely. So again, we got to remember this is early 2000s, like 2001, 2002, just for context. And all the books, and I mean, I own them all, right? This sign behind me is covering up a bookshelf that has probably 200 books on it. All of the books said, they said two things. The 1% rule is the only way to go. And 1% rule is, hey, if it costs $100,000, it has to rent for $1,000 a month. That's simplistically the 1% rule. The other thing that's the book said is you need to invest 30 minutes from your home. As I said in my intro, I live in the Bay Area, Mountain View, California specifically. So I spent a year, 52 Sundays in a row, looking in the Bay Area for a 1% rule. They don't exist, but I didn't know it, right? And this is 2002, they didn't exist. I mean, today they really don't exist. So we were pretty bummed after spending literally 52 weeks, right? I felt like we did the work. We were looking for the magic street. It didn't happen. So we came together, my wife and I. This is definitely a team sport, as I talked about in the book.
Yeah.
And we pull out a map of California and we go, what do we want to do? Do we want to go out of state? That was one question, because it's real. And I looked at her and said, honey, I'm not getting on another airplane. I already get on an airplane for my day job. I'm not doing that again. I'm a terrible flyer, even though I almost 1 million miles. I hate it. So she goes, okay, got it. So we pull out a California map and we start drawing circles, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. And the first big market, big for us, meant more than 100,000 people, was Fresno, California, 2.5 hours away. One way, 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So we didn't know anybody. But it was the first market we found. We made some phone calls, literally phone calls, right? Because the internet wasn't there, Facebook, all that stuff wasn't there. Found an agent, saw one property that drive down. It was on 1818 Norris Drive East. You could look it up. We bought it for 107. and it rented for 1,100. So it exceeded the 1% rule.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
I went down there going, oh man, I'm going to see 10 properties. I'm going to learn the area. But again, this is 2002, right when the market's kind of picking up.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing that made sense. And we started driving home, and I looked over at Olivia, who is my wife, and she goes, why didn't we write an offer? I'm like, well, I thought we were going to see more stuff. She goes, you've been driving me around for 52 weeks in a row, either, blank or get off the pot. I'm like, I guess I got to write an offer. So we pulled over, we called the agent. We agreed to write it at list price because I didn't know you could offer less. Again, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
Right. I offer asking price, and we get it. And lo and behold, that's the beginning of our journey. So that's the 1% rule.
So a point for the audience out there is, you don't have to invest in the immediate area where you live. Now, in my case, my rentals are about an hour away from me. Yours are 2.5 hours. In my case, yes, it was a market where I could get the 1% rule, but it was also a place where I had cultivated my real estate investing network and my mentor were there.
Mhm.
You did something I would say is even more, kind of more risky, right? You didn't have, a property manager or a house flipper or like anybody in the area that you knew, and you just took the plunge though.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. I mean,
Mhm.
I felt like if I had driven another 10 miles down the road and not pulled over and written the offer, Olivia would have said, okay, we're doing something else. Right. Because
Okay.
literally, remember, right? 52 weeks, every Sunday, we're out for like 3 or 4 hours trying to find the 1% rule in the Bay Area. And then she goes, okay, we found it. Now, basically write the offer, you idiot, or stop wasting my time. And she was like, I'm like, you're right. I've been telling you this for this long time. We go out to dinner and we talk about it. We finally found it. You're right. I got to write the offer or stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad when your wife is like, just go ahead and get it over with.
Yeah,
It's time.
it's
Um,
time. Yes.
so yes, you mentioned your very first property. This is another excerpt from the book.
Yeah.
Norris Drive there, 107,000, rent for 195. So you're there. You got it. It's rented out, and you guys are on your journey. And then the very next page here in the book, we had a little bit of a horror story. Okay,
Oh,
so 2 weeks later, it was rented out, and then surprise, the new tenants. So tell
oh,
us that first horror story here, which is up on the page, screenwriter.
man, I really hope this doesn't happen to you your first time out, but
Right.
it happened to us, and it's fun to look at now, but man, I could still go back to that and I shiver. So we do everything right. We get a property manager. We clean up the place. We do criminal checks, reference check, landlord checks, employment checks. Everything checks out. We move a tenant in. They pay 1095, which again we were told we'd get, but until you get a signed lease, you never know.
Mm-hmm.
We're excited. I remember going out to dinner and having a little toast, like, yes, we're on our way.
Right.
Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, we get a note. We get a call from our property manager saying, by the way, the wife of, I've already forget their name, but they tell me a name. I don't recall, but
Right.
the wife takes off, and but supposedly the husband still, the husband will still pay. He's still there, blah blah blah. But oh, by the way, something's different. We don't know yet what's going on, but oh, by the way, something's different. Then 2 weeks later, doesn't pay rent. So 3-day notice, all of that. He basically, the long story short, was probably already an alcoholic, but really turns it up a notch. Starts taking wine bottles and making a wine rack out of my drywall, right?
Oh
Just putting
no.
empty bottles into the drywall.
Right.
And he's in our property for 3 months because it takes a while in California to get people out. I
Mm-hmm.
spend $1,000, and oh, by the way, we got to spend $15,000. So roughly 6 months after the purchase, we had first month's rent deposit. Then we lost 3 months. We lost 15 grand on the repair. We had to pay an attorney. And I remember looking at Olivia going, oh my God. Because again, you got to remember, we don't know anybody in Fresno. We'd never been to Fresno except one drive to Yosemite, years before.
Mm-hmm.
No context, no boots on the ground. And I'm like, oh God, this is it. I spent at this point 1.5 years thinking real estate was my future. And we're staring at a $15,000 expense that we didn't want. And,
Wow.
Olivia goes, hope that doesn't happen again. I'm like, huh? She goes, keep going. We knew this could happen. Keep going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, I did not expect that. And it was good from there.
Well, we got a question there. I got projected on here. Cocoa Butter Barbie. Hey, InvestDoc. I have my first house. I'm ready to rent to someone, but I can't get beyond the scary feeling of bad renters. What if someone sues me? What if this? What if that?
Yeah.
Mike, you got any insight to share, Mike?
Yeah. Well, you are in the people business.
Mm-hmm.
You've signed up to be a landlord. It's not about sticks and bricks and spreadsheets. You are definitely in the people business, and some people are rotten, even though they may put on a good front.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot less than people fear, for sure. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I tell you my first story, which was horrible. I never have hope happens, but I've now had thousands of tenants, and I have two such stories. It's bad that it happened to be the first one, but it
Mm-hmm.
is what it is. Um, but you've got to get through it. You've got to do the right things, right? Starts with processes and procedures up front. Usually for me, it's a property manager because I'm too far away. You got to have insurance and likely an umbrella. You've got to
Mm-hmm.
set it up right. And
Mm-hmm.
and if you're going to be a landlord, it's hard to make the mortgage if you don't have a tenant.
Mm-hmm.
You got to
Absolutely.
you got to go.
Absolutely. So, I've got another question here. Where we go. Carl says, look, I live in Canada, but I intend to invest in properties in the U.S. in the coming future. And I advised him. I said, hey, man, get somebody on the ground that you can trust. And he's like, I'm looking to build a network and a team, but where do I start, Doc? Now, for
Mhm.
me, with the whole Jacksonville thing, I started with going to my very first ever Real Estate Investors Association meeting. I'd never been to one before, but it's like I got a network, and you basically start asking around. And what I found, and maybe Mike, you can comment on this,
Mhm.
with these RIA meetings, as they say, about 80% of the people that are there are not actually all that serious investors. It's like that 80-20 rule. There's about 20% of people that are really doing a fair amount of deals, and are active and everything. And everybody knows who they are, who like the
Mhm.
real players are. And you ask around, and you can start to get a sense of people's um, reputations, basically. So
Mhm.
that's how it started for me. I mean, how did you eventually wind up getting some folks on the ground there in Fresno you could trust?
Oh, lots of day trips, lots of emails and phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
Again, social media
Yeah.
wasn't really around. What I would
Mm-hmm.
tell you is it all boils down to today. Again, a lot of people follow me because I invest I call it out of area, not out of state.
Yeah.
It's out of area.
Uh-huh.
Is the property manager. And what I would
Mm-hmm.
advise someone to figure out is, because I fired the first five I had, which is
Yeah.
so painful.
It's painful.
It's
Yeah.
painful. Thank God I only
Mm-hmm.
had one or two properties at the time, right? It would have
Mm-hmm.
been way painful if it was today. But
Mm-hmm.
find out what the principal, meaning the owner, does. This
Mm-hmm.
is my experience. If the owner is also a real estate broker, my experience says run for the hills. Why do I say that? Well, real estate market is cyclical. And when the real estate market gets really, really hot or really, really cold, that real estate broker is either going to ignore you because they're making tons of commission selling stuff, or
Mm-hmm.
grind you because he or she is not making, right? So
Mm.
for me, when a principal is an own, like a real estate broker is and property manages his side hustle, is,
Mhm.
light bulb money. Um, I run away. I want to be with a company where the owner owns doors,
Yes.
10,
Okay.
15, 20 doors. Because then
Hmm.
he's going to think like an investor. He's going to have systems like an investor. He's going to know the area. Then all you got to do is go, what electrician do you use? What roofer do you use?
Mhm.
Um, as opposed to being a real estate broker and maybe getting kickbacks or whatever it might be.
Mm.
I want to know who the owner uses. For me, that's been game changing for me, is when I found a company where the owner, owned at the time more properties than I did. So
Mhm. Mhm.
that was a huge find for me. So if I was going out of area again, that's what I'd be looking for.
Great advice. Great advice. One other point I just picked out of the book. We live in a microwave society. We live in a society where, the notion of getting wealthy quick. I mean, hey, I understand the appeal, but just realistically, though, doing it via real estate is not a quick process, right? And so I just want people to know, you've been doing this for over 10 years, and just in the past two, have you gotten comfortable enough to finally leave your job? And that had been the goal all along. So we got, a decade or more of
Mhm,
doing both things. So I
mhm,
just want you to, emphasize that to folks. It's not not
Yeah.
quick. Hmm.
Yeah, I guess what I would tell you there is all the stuff you see on social media, I love that word microwave age.
Hmm.
All that stuff you're seeing is income, active
Hmm.
income, and active income is the most highly taxed out there. And if you stop doing whatever you're doing, the income goes away.
Hmm.
Wealth is built over time. And in my journey, as we call out in the book, was 15 years in duration.
Hmm.
That is a long time. I get it, but you have to realize we had to replace two six-figure incomes,
Mm.
and we live in a very expensive part of the world. I believe most people can get it done in 10 years or less. But it takes time. Your tenant's got to pay it off. You got to have appreciation and rental inflation. You got to live below your means. You can't kill your momentum by buying a new car at year 5. And you've got to sacrifice. I know it's really uncommon or uncomfortable to say that, but it's true. If you're willing to sacrifice today and for a couple of years, your future, you can do whatever you want. And we're living proof.
Right. And and on the slide here, we talk about the journey slow. You mentioned like every time you were acquiring a new property, and therefore more cash flow was coming in, you had to take some of that money and put it into the next property to get it into make ready
Mm-hmm.
conditions, as you call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that constant reinvestment of the profits. Now, you mentioned, you and your wife both having six-figure incomes.
Mm-hmm.
As I was reading through the reviews on Amazon, one thing that came up that I thought was kind of interesting, the one gentleman pointed out, he's like, well, this is easy, when you make a lot of income like that, and how applicable is this for folks that make more modest incomes? So, could you address that? Is this something that only people who make, a ton of money with their
Yeah.
job can do?
Yeah, I read all the comments, so I know
Mm-hmm.
exactly which one you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I will go back and tell you, it's not about what you make for income,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm living proof of it. It's what you spend,
Mm-hmm.
right? How many six-figure earners do you know? Frankly, how many doctors do you know that still live paycheck to paycheck?
I
Your
have some colleagues.
Yeah, I mean,
you know.
it's no joke. Um, so it's about your expenses. And when you live in the Bay Area and your property taxes are X, and our monthly nut would make most of you embarrassed. um but I can't it is my story.
Mhm.
I could tell you that if we had a more modest goal of like $2,500 or 3,000,
Mhm.
and if that was our monthly expense, we could have been done, at year
A
6
long
or
time ago.
7. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when your monthly nuts, significantly more than that, it's never been about my income. The
Mm.
fact that I was willing to sacrifice and live below our means, I give full credit to the wife in the book, because we could have upgraded. How many times do you know people, they become doctors in year 2? I don't know what doctors do, but they get a raise or they become
Mhm.
the best at something and they get a bump in pay. And what is the first thing they do? They go buy a bigger house,
Buy a big house. Yeah, man.
right?
Yeah.
We didn't do that, right? We
Mhm.
made hard choices. So for somebody to be disrespectful like that is hurtful, frankly, because we never moved, we never upgraded, we lived significantly below our means. We went from spending 100% of our income to living on 50% of our income.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's why we were able to do it, because we ratcheted back our expenses and we're willing to sacrifice and get very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, no matter what income level you're at, it definitely is about sacrifice. And I would say yes. I have colleagues that, yes, they live paycheck to paycheck. I have some colleagues that took a big hurting in the real estate run up to
Mhm.
'08,
Oh, for
when
sure.
they basically were investing in very high end properties and flipping them, or buy, that kind of thing, and they took real baths on it. So, like, nobody that I know is doing what I'm doing, like, buying modestly priced single family homes and doing it very methodically. I guess that's not sexy, So, but it was safe. And with respect to, people have come at me to a degree on that same thing about, well, you're a physician, this is easy and
Mhm.
everything. But just to put in perspective, my first year out of training, we stayed in an apartment, and I was newly married. So having a wife that was willing to stay in an apartment for 2 years, a very modest apartment, while I had a lot of student debt to retire before I could get into investing. So
Yeah.
you got, it's about sacrifice, it is about sacrifice.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to make very clear, and I've called it out many times, is We got to our first 8 properties. All we had was 40 grand. Now I realize $40,000 may be a lot to some of you, but
Hmm.
it is remarkably less than most of you think I had.
Hmm. Hmm.
We got to 8 houses with $40,000. Now
Mm.
we got to the first 3, right? We put $20,000 down and we got 10,000 and 10,000. That's how we got to 3. The 40 grand's gone.
Hmm.
Then the market ran up, so we did cash out refis. Now I
Hmm.
want to hear, oh, you're lucky to be in California, and blah. I mean, that's my story. I can't.
Yeah,
It is
you
what it
can't.
is, right?
It is what it is. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I took the cash out refi. What did a lot of people do? They went and splurged on new trucks and new toys and vacations. No, we threw it into 3 more houses. So we recycled that 40 grand up to 8 houses. And now it's 2007. And again, you could call me lucky or whatever you want to do, but I was watching the market every day and realizing that same house I bought for 107, which you can go to Zillow and look at, it's 1818 Norris Drive East, 93703. We sold for 263. Technically, we exchanged it.
Wow. Nice.
So we took
Nice.
all that equity and we moved it into multifamily. So again, no new money. We took all of that and we went from 8 to 80 units via
Yeah.
1031 exchanges at the peak.
So, I bought starting in 2014, it was my first rental that I bought in Jacksonville. And yes, the appreciation hasn't been that brisk, but yeah, there's some that have gone up 50% or more.
Yeah,
And so, yes, I've been able to do that cash out refinance. And I tell you, when appreciation happens, it's incredible if you really pull out all that equity and use it for your next deal.
absolutely.
Even though it wasn't the original goal, it was cash flow, but you cannot substitute equity appreciation. Shout out to Mr. RJ Rochelle. I'm about to start my investments in rentals this year. I think you ought to pick up Mike's book, definitely, and do a lot of other reading too. Hit up Bigger Pockets, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Get your information and your education up. Contrarian Expatriate just ordered a real estate book as a gift. I appreciate that. Think that's an excellent place to start. All right, so let's see our next thing here. Oh yeah, I just had your slide in there about the challenges and just dealing with tenants. You mentioned it's a people business ultimately. We're talking numbers, we're talking cash flow, we're talking appreciation, but ultimately it is a people business, and you have to deal with all the infallibility or I'm sorry, fallibility and faults of folks. And yeah, why don't you just go through that list, man? People will
Yeah.
lie, people will do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Again, you're to one of the earlier questions about, help me get past being nervous. I'm very clear. When you get into the landlord business, bad stuff will happen.
Hmm.
And oh, by the way, bad stuff comes in multiple forms. There's the people side, right? People
Hmm.
won't pay, people will lie, people will vacate, people will steal, people will break. It's amazing what people will do. I'm sorry, that's part of it. But also, stuff breaks, right?
Yep. There
Mother
we go.
Nature gets upset,
The
and
physical
when
side,
yeah,
yeah.
the physical side, and plumbing, and sewers, and water heaters, and it just goes on and on and on, right? So,
Hmm.
um, you need to build up a callus. You need to make sure your numbers are never tight. Again, I am way conservative investor. I'm not the high leverage go. Have negative cash flow. I talk about no alligators in the book, which to me is negative cash flow. Um, it's. I just want you to know going in that bad stuff's going to happen. I hope
Yeah.
it's not on the first house like for us.
Hmm.
But I don't want you to be surprised. Somebody's going to lie, cheat, steal, upset you, and just know going in, it's going to happen.
It is, and probably the most significant thing that I've dealt with is, I'm in hurricane country, and a couple of
Mm.
years ago when the hurricane hit Jacksonville, that was despite having 10 rentals, about 8 of my tenants had significant effects from the storm in terms of missing paychecks, missing work, and then
Oh
on
yeah.
top of that. We had some roof damage and branches and cleanup and all that. And that was the first time that I ever had to feed my portfolio, because there just wasn't enough money that came in.
Mm-hmm.
And now, fortunately, up until that point, I had good occupancy, and we rehabbed the things pretty well up front. So I didn't have any major capital expenditure. So we had that stuff in reserve. So you got to know, if you're getting into this rental game, all these positive months where things are going good, you need to set aside
Yes,
some
please.
money. You need to do that. That is huge.
Great advice. Yes,
Mm-hmm,
absolutely.
mm-hmm. So physical side, people side, slow journey. And there was one other thing. Okay. So yeah, so in terms of getting other people's money, which I say usually includes the bank's money.
Mm-hmm.
No one can build a sizable rental portfolio without at some point getting some outside money. So talk about how much having good credit was important to you. How
Mm-hmm.
much bank money did you use? How much friends and family money?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned about borrowing against your 401k.
Yeah.
Talk about some place where you
Yeah.
got some more money. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these are often embarrassing conversations to have, but again, I didn't know any better, right? Nobody in my family did real
Mm-hmm.
estate, all of these things. I always assumed that if you had a 6-figure income, a 7-figure net worth, 800 credit score, that banks would always lend to you. That
Mm-hmm.
was my assumption. Lo and behold, real estate crash comes. We go to buy a property in 2010, which was a great time to buy.
Mm-hmm.
It was about 50% off already, and the bank told us no. I'm
Mm.
like, what do you mean no? I mean, do you want an extra 5% down? What you can't really mean no. You mean not yet. What do you mean no? They're like,
Mm.
no, you're too risky, right? Because we had, I don't know what it was, 85, 90, 95 doors by then. And they're like, no, you're you, Mr. I haven't missed a payment, credit score, blah, blah, blah. You're the problem. I mean, what do you mean I'm the problem? You're a
Mm-hmm.
real estate investor and you caused
Mm.
this crash. I'm like, no, you're the bank and you're the one that freaking caused this problem. You're the one doing these ninja loans and liar loans and all of that. But they're like, no, we're not lending to any real estate investors. None. Don't ask
Mm.
again. Don't come back. I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to buy this house. It's 50% off. What the heck am I going to do? So we immediately start getting creative because, and we didn't go back to a bank until like 2018. So
Mm-hmm.
right in 2010, we got to find another way. First thing I do is borrow against my 401k, which if I was still employed, I could take up to 50 grand, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've
we
done
did
that
that.
once. Yep, I've done that myself.
We owned our cars free and clear. They weren't anything to speak about, but I had another 20 grand I could get that way. We did that. Then it was okay. I didn't know any better. So we found hard money. Like I'm willing to pay 12% on this and 2 points. Cause again, it's that kind of deal.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, I keep talking to all my friends and family about, God, I hate paying 12%. I wish I could get something lower. And then people start going, well, I got money. Cause
Mm-hmm.
again, this is 2000 stock market. They're like, I'm earning less than 1%.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, let's figure out how I can use it. And then I did some research on private money, made sure they're truly friends and family, multiple connections. And I paid them 10%, right? Because why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, 10 is less than 12
Yeah.
and no points. I'm like, I win. And
Mm-hmm.
we had lots of those loans for I think I still have 2 left that were on 10-year balloons. And we're paying 10% on relatively cheap properties and they cash flow like crazy. So we just kept recycling money. We would buy it, and then we'd refi it and buy it and refi it. Lots of good stuff.
Yeah, one thing I'd emphasize to the audience there, if you're gonna make a real go at this, you've gotta have a decent sophistication of finance, right? You will deal with banks. That's the best money if you can get it because it's the lowest rates and longest term, but it can be the most difficult at times. So you mentioned in the books, banks love lending to people who have big W-2 incomes that they can come after. But even once you get over 10 real estate loans, at least in your name, a lot of times you can't get any more bank money. And so you have to find alternative sources. You mentioned, the friends and family, you're paying them a nice interest rate. I have done that. Private money. I wouldn't advise doing it unless you really know what you're doing and you know the deal that you're buying is going to you have a high level of confidence it's going to work out. I certainly wouldn't start there. And the other thing that's kind of ironic, is once you start doing really well and all your money comes from rentals and you're really a real estate entrepreneur, that doesn't necessarily mean the floodgates are going to open with bank money. They don't. It's kind of weird, right? It's kind of weird in that they don't loan to people that have already demonstrated an ability to build a portfolio like that. They love seeing the W-2, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. What I would tell folks is if you don't have any rental properties today, you're in a much better place than I am to buy your next one, because you
mm-hmm,
can go get FHA money. Your first 4 loans are ridiculously easy. You have
mm-hmm,
you have the down payment, you have a job. It's pretty much a yes answer. From
mm-hmm,
5 to 10, it's a little more difficult. You have to have reserves. They might have a seasoning period. Um, and then after 10, you're going to be paying, you can still get bank money, but it's going to be stuff that they keep on the books. It's no longer going to have a 3 or a 4 on it. It will have a 6 or a 7 on it.
mm-hmm,
Right.
mm-hmm.
So things change. But again, don't worry about, where we're at. If you haven't had a rental yet, you are so lucky. You can get your first rental with 30-year fixed rate debt with something with a
Mm-hmm.
3 or a 4. My
Mm-hmm.
first 4 had a 6 or a 7 on it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
come on. It's pretty cool.
And just to translate that, yeah, I mean, if you can get 30-year money at 3 point something or even like 4%, that winds up being a monthly payment in the high 3s to low 4s in terms of your debt service. And so if
Yeah.
you've got a property that's hopefully renting out at $1,000 or $1,100 a month, I mean, that's potentially a nice amount of cash flow. It's not that you're sort of barely getting there at $200, but maybe you're getting $500-600 or so. So and that makes a huge difference once you start building up.
Yeah,
So.
I spend most of my
Mm-hmm.
time encouraging people to get to 4, and 4 is nothing advanced, right? Why 4? Well, it's the easiest money to get, and it's
Mm-hmm.
back to how we started. One of your first questions. My goal was 10. I don't know why it was 10. It was a double-digit number, I guess. But if I tell people all the time, you can just get to 4, your financial future is going to be better. And then when you
Mm-hmm.
get to 4, then decide what you want to do. If you don't like being a landlord, stop. Fine, no big deal. But if you want to
Mm-hmm.
go
Mm-hmm.
past 4, then let's go. But let's just try to get everybody to 4, because I think everybody will be better off.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mike, tell people quickly about your YouTube channel. So I didn't mention that. Mike has an active YouTube channel. What are you trying to accomplish? What are people on the chat here? We've got 20 people in here. What can they expect coming over to your channel?
Yeah. So if you go to, again, everything I do is one rental at a time. It's the name of the book, name of the channel, name of my website, name of my Instagram page. What they're going to see is they're going to get daily content, right? I no longer
Mm-hmm.
work. I put out daily content. I do a daily millionaire news. Basically, I'm always up early. I read an hour or so of news and I share what's going on. I do probably 4 or 5 investor interviews, such as yourself, a
Mm-hmm.
week. I do walkthrough videos because I'm still active in the business. It's not like I'm done. So I share what my team is doing. Basically for me, I spend up until noon either working out or doing something for the YouTube channel. And then afternoon, it's just the wife and I the rest of the day, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
lucky enough to be free. She gives me till noon to kind of be me. I'm a morning person. She's not. She's out of bed by 9:30. I'm already up by 3 or 4 hours by then. So it's a great harmony. So if you go to the channel and subscribe, you're going to get probably 2 or 3 videos a day. I've been averaging over an hour of original content for the last month and a half. So it's fun for me.
Yeah, I see. We got a few questions in the box here in the chat, and we're going to get to them. One last point before we take those questions, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike myself, it looks like you've graduated, man, from the single family to small or even medium multifamily. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So again, I wish I could have told you this was the vision all along. All I ever lived in my entire life was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, one story, about 1,100 square foot house. So that's all I bought. That's all I ever knew. But in the book, you'll see it was a pretty critical moment. We were looking to buy the 9th house using Norris Drive as a comparison. We couldn't find anything for less than 260 grand. And oh, by the way, it's still rented for 1,100. It should be obvious, but I'll say it. It rents really. Cash flow is really nice when you can buy it for 107. It doesn't cash flow when you buy it for 260. The math just doesn't work. Doesn't work, right? And my brain almost blew up trying to find the 9th one because again, my goal was 10, right? And I'm stuck at 8.
Yeah.
And I went to a local real estate meetup, back to the whole 80-20 rule. Bumped into the right person at the right time. He said, "Hey." He said he called me Mike, but I always translated in my head as "Hey, idiot." But anyways, why don't you go look at small multis? I'm like, What do you mean small multis? Go, go look at 5, 10, 15 unit buildings. I didn't know any different. I thought only billionaires owned those buildings. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd never looked. I'd been in the market like 8 years at this point, or 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
and never
Yeah.
looked, right? Never went to LoopNet, never did any of this stuff. So I looked and I'm like, oh my God, there's a 5 unit building, kind of the same configuration as houses. It's just, just like this, like my condo I live in. It's just five front doors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 223 grand. It's on Vassar Road in Fresno. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God. And it rents for $3 grand total. Oh, and it has laundry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's $40,000 less than I can sell this house for. Done.
Mm-hmm.
List
Yes.
the house, go through my first 1031 exchange. And, I'm very simple. If some works more, some is good, more is better. We flipped,
Mm-hmm.
we did 1031 exchanges out of houses into multifamily because houses were overpriced and multifamily were underpriced.
And just to tell folks, a 1031 exchange, which I've not done myself, but basically, and if I explain it right, is when you have a property that is appreciated in value. Say, for instance, you bought it for 100, you could sell it for 263.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of taking that hit on the $163,000 of profit, if you take that money and plow it into another real estate sale, you get to basically defer that tax and don't take a hit on it at all. That's a 1031 exchange, right?
Yeah. And often called the like kind exchange. So what you can't do, right? I couldn't have sold Norris Drive and bought a bigger house because it's not like kind, right? It's going from a rental to owner occupant. But because I was going from rental to rental in a right time frame, there's lots of rules. It's very you got to
do it in 90 days or something like that.
I think you have to identify in 45 and close in 180. Just check out the rules. But for us, it was game changing. We went from 8 units to 80 units in a year. No new money.
You guys hear that? 8 to 80 units in a year. That is a 10x move for all you familiar with Grant Cardone. that is amazing. That is amazing. So, and if you wouldn't mind, Mike, if you what's your total number of doors you have, and how much of it's paid off percentage wise versus because I think that people want to know, like, how comfortable, like, is everything paid off? Is that what you have to do before you feel comfortable leaving your job, or what?
Yeah, so we peaked out at 181 doors. I think I usually just say 175. But I think it peaks out at 181 now because we've added some more. So let me answer the whole paid off question 2 different ways. So as we were still working and growing, none of our stuff was paid off. I didn't want it paid off, right? Because I was about acquisitions, building a bigger base. So when appreciation came, mortgage pay down came, I would win with a bigger base. Now that we've exited, we spent the first year reviewing our portfolio, and we have done some cash out refis on some to raise the debt up. We've taken the capital and plowed it into some high quality single family homes and paid those off. So we have piles for the worst case scenario. So percentage paid off, I don't know. It's hard, like door wise, percentage is probably pretty low. It's probably 10%. Value wise, it might be 15 or 20% paid off.
Wow. So keep that in mind, guys. Only about 10 or 15% of the portfolio is paid off, but it cash flows enough where you can service that debt and live off of it. I mean, just absolutely living the dream here. So that is great. That is great. So, Mike, if you don't mind, I'm going to answer a few questions here, and I'm going to try to scroll back up and grab some of these. We've had a few cool things. Let's see here. BK asks, is it worth it to start investment properties with cheap properties in rural low-income areas as compared to urban low-income areas? You got any thoughts on that?
Well, so that's kind of I would want to know more data. So let's answer it this way. I don't mind investing in low income areas. Let's take that off the table. I invest below the median. So my median for Fresno is 260. The most expensive house, I think I own a house that might be worth 250. I didn't pay anything near that, but so I don't own these nice new builds, right? So let's that's where I'm at, right? So I'm in the area. I don't mind Section 8. I have lots of Section 8 units, both houses and apartments. So I have no problem with low income. Some folks do. I do not.
Right.
Now, rural. I don't know what you mean by that, but when I think that means septic, that means wells. For me, it's about, can people get to and from work, right? Is there a bus line, or how are they doing it? And what's the population?
Yeah.
Right.
And is it growing?
Yeah. Is it growing? Right. Are there
Right.
like 12 people that live there and 30 homes? It's probably not where I want to be.
Right.
But if there's, 30 people in 12 homes, I mean, I guess I don't mind rural or, kind of other areas, but it's got to have growth. It's got to have the ability to get to work, because I want my tenants to work, right? At least it's something, right? They got to pay. They got to, I'm kind of a landlord, so like rent's important to me. So low income doesn't bother me. Some people look at me and just assume that I wouldn't do that, but no. I mean, I think 40% of my tenants are Section 8 today, and I probably peaked at 60% years ago.
So Carl asked, my strategy is to acquire 4 income properties over 20 years, purchase 1 property every 5 years. What do you think of that strategy? Well, in general terms, Carl, I mean, you're going at it at a very at a slow enough pace. It would seem that you're not going to over leverage or anything like that. You probably could, honestly, once you get the first 4 or so, you probably could afford to go a little faster. But again, it's all about, what's your income level, your debt coverage, that kind of thing, your credit, that kind of stuff. But as a very general rule, Mike, I've gone a lot slower than you have, and one of the reasons is, even though I could take on more debt, we all have our comfort level, in terms of what that is. So, but from what you're describing, Carl, you're going certainly slow enough.
Yeah, well, when I read that, and again, I could be reading entirely wrong, but you and I both talk to people all the time. Carl might be buying his properties with cash.
Okay.
When I read that, I hear Dave Ramsey. That's what I hear when I read that question, right? Pay it off, own it free and clear. Frankly, 20 years, again, I don't know Carl from anyone, right? So I'm just guessing, but that's how I read that question. What I would tell you is debt has never been this cheap. If you can go get 4 30-year loans with sub 4%, I would rather do that sooner rather than later, because inflation is 2%. If you believe the numbers, which I don't, but that's a different conversation. So you're basically getting free money, and it's 30-year fixed. Could it go lower? Sure. Oof. Is it likely? No. So I would be in a hurry to get 4 30-year mortgages. And I don't believe in taking the first 4 free and clear. Yes, I own stuff free and clear, but that's only after I exited the rat race. You got to build a big foundation. The foundation gives you appreciation, mortgage pay down, tax advantage, all that stuff. That's what I see when I see Carl's question.
Yeah. And I came up, a pretty debt averse person in terms of how I was raised and everything. And it certainly spilled over into my attitude towards real estate debt initially. But honestly, there's just no real way, I think, to do this really long term if you're going to try to do everything with pure cash. It doesn't really make sense, and you'll pass up, for instance, in an accelerating market, even one that's going up modestly. If it takes you several years to save up the cash purchase to buy a property, it may have appreciated so much more by the time you're able to buy it cash, and you could have smartly leveraged it and bought it 2 or 3 years earlier and experience some of that appreciation. So it's interesting you point that out. He might be a Dave Ramsey disciple, cash everything, no debt for nothing. I just don't think that works in the real estate game. I really don't. You'll never outdo somebody who smartly uses leverage. Never. With all cash.
No, so, it won't happen. Yep.
Recession Hacker asks, how long should I wait between loans? I guess I'm assuming he's saying, like, you get a loan for an investment property, it's performing and everything. When can you get another one? I know in terms of, like if you ever try to do anything like refinance the property or something like that, there's something called a seasoning period where you might have to wait 6 months to a year before you can really do anything with that loan. But in terms of like the time you wait between, you get one deal, you put a loan on it, and then maybe the next month you find another deal. And I think as long as you haven't exhausted your 10 loan limit and all that, because I don't think there's any magical time period of waiting. You have any insight?
Yeah. I guess what I would answer that question is there's no bank lending rule that I'm aware of. Again,
Mm-hmm.
for purchase money loans, for season or anything. Yeah, I've known people to buy 2 or 3 properties in a single month
Mm-hmm.
because they have none and they're now at 3. But what I think he might be asking, and again, he's probably not asking this, but I want the rest of the audience to hear it,
Mm-hmm.
is I don't recommend anybody, once you get your first rental, I recommend sitting back for 90 days, 3 to 6 months, just to make sure you're okay being a landlord, right?
Mm.
Don't take all the money that you got, run up to the casino table and put it all on the numbers the first time. Because who knows, you may not like it. You may not
Mm-hmm.
like the market. You may not like, don't put too many chips on the table until you've really learned. I'm conservative. I'm so conservative. Maybe some people don't like hearing that, but I don't. If I bought my first rental, people that follow me, I'm like, okay, great. Wait at least 3 months before you do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I didn't. I waited probably a good 8 months between unit 1 and 2. Now things picked up afterwards, but yeah, just getting your feet kind of wet and seeing what kind of time intensity and what kind of issues would come up. And fortunately, I didn't have the horror story that Mike had of his first rental. But yeah, I agree with that very much. Let's see what Recession Hacker here's. Are there any AI apps or programs that can predict the hot areas in the country to invest in? Wow. Well, the short answer is there's tons of information out there. Zillow. I watch. I'm a nerd. Maybe you are too, Mike. I watch these real estate conferences that are online. Some of them are really great. The hedge funds talk about what areas they're looking at and stuff like that. But in general, for me, one of the reasons I chose to invest very generically in Florida, the population growth was there, right? I had opportunities to invest in, my old stomping grounds. I'm from the Midwest, the old steel town, Youngstown, Ohio, right? And there's some folks that do some investing up there in the Midwest. And I didn't do it because I know that a lot of those cities and towns there, the population's going down. And so I just thought from an exit standpoint and the ability to raise rents and appreciation and that kind of thing. So I was like, no, I don't want to do that, even though the cash flow and the numbers looked okay and several things fit the 1% rule. I like the Sun Belt. And I know obviously certain areas in California, the population's going up. And so that's a very general answer for me.
Yeah, I get this question all the time, and I think it's kind of one of those red herrings, honestly. And this may sound harsh, and please, Recession Hacker, I don't mean it to sound harsh. I believe if you learn your market, you can find good and great deals somewhere. Right now, again, if you're in the Manhattan or you live in the Mountain View, California, you may have to drive somewhere. I think it is far more important to find an area that you can learn and understand than picking the next hot market. I think that's a distraction, and it's lots of opinions, and you don't have a team there. Could I go to other markets? Sure. But, could I rebuild what I've built? Not quickly, and it's not worth the risk. So I think if you have some base rules, for me, it was big enough people-wise, population, right? I wanted at least 100,000. Fresno's 500,000. I wanted it to be growing. It's one of the cities and counties in Fresno that is growing. Incomes kind of match real estate prices. It's not so out of whack like the Bay Area or San Francisco. I'm not going to go to Huntsville or Dallas 5 years ago just because it's the number one on Money Magazine or something. I think that's how you lose money. If you're chasing, you're late, and I'm not a big fan of that.
Understood. BK from the Rockies, this will be our last question here. Ask, after 4 units, you have to get a commercial mortgage, I think. Can you speak to that? Have you got commercial mortgages? And what's the big difference between them and residential?
So BK from the Rockies is absolutely correct. 4 units and below is called residential mortgages.
Mm-hmm.
It is what you when I talked about getting 4 rent or 4 loans. That's what we're talking about, 4 residential loans. We have plenty of commercial mortgages, and she's right. We own a 5-unit building, and we have a commercial mortgage. We own a 20-unit building. We have a commercial mortgage on it. Grant Cardone owns 1,000 unit. He has a commercial mortgage. What's the difference? The terms are way different. 4 units and below, you get 30-year fixed rate money.
Mm-hmm.
There's very, 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 very rare occasions where you can get 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and it's only for the biggest of big boys.
Mm-hmm.
Most people get 3, 5, or 7-year terms, which forces you to refinance.
Mm-hmm.
Their amortization schedules are typically 20 or 25 versus 30. So the payments are higher. Down payments or your equity position are much, much higher. Right, you can get an owner-occupant loan, residential loan with 3.5% down. You get an investor loan with 20% down. Most commercial loans are 35% down, so your equity position is much higher. And then the paperwork. Oh my gosh, the paperwork is, residential is like this big, and commercial is like this big. So it's not. You just have to have more money. You have to have more reserves. The payments are much higher because the amortization schedule is lower. It forces you to refi, which is what I think is going to blow up in 3 to 4 years when all these people bought, bigger is better, and they're going to have to refi and get in trouble. So yeah, there's a big difference.
It's nowhere near as favorable. Absolutely.
Yeah, no.
And the other thing I should mention too, and I don't know this from experience, of one of my colleagues who had a commercial loan. He basically had a strip mall with tenants in it, and when one of the tenants moved out, and the amount of money that was coming in to service the loan changed, they basically called the loan on him before. So and I've heard that before, like these commercial loans, the bank has a lot more free leeway to just say, oh, we want our money back, So
these commercial brokers, commercial lenders, they don't play, man.
Right.
They in a residential loan, because it's the backbone of America and blah, blah, blah. It's very owner friendly. You get into commercial lending, it is bank friendly. They don't play, they'll take you out in a minute.
Absolutely. Now, I said that was the last question, but there's actually one more. We got a medical student in here, so it's right to my heart. John D, who's going into emergency medicine or getting ready to fit. Oh yeah, he's going to match in 2020. So he'll be starting his residency in 2020. So, a physician interested in real estate investing, I can't ignore that. Would you recommend paying off school loans prior to investing in rentals, or is it possible to use the income off of rentals to pay off school loans? John, if you're not hip to it, there's a very good site called the White Coat Investor that is a physician finance focused blog where a lot of these kind of conversations happen and whatnot. I'll tell you my actual experience. You're way ahead of me in that you are in medical school and you're on a stream like this and learning about real estate. I didn't know anything when I finished residency, so at 31 years old, getting my first quote unquote real job and a real big paycheck, all I knew was to pay off my student loans, right? I didn't know anything about real estate investing. If I would have known that you could make an argument that buying the same assets in 2006 that I wind up buying in 2014 actually might have made more sense, and not to defer all these big chunks that I was doing towards student loan payments, the majority of which were at attractive interest rates. So if your student loan debt is low interest and you know what you're doing on the real estate side of things, you can make the argument that it would be better to buy some assets and to pay off your student loan debt at a more prolonged schedule and not do the big chunks of it that I did. But I will say this, there is something to be said for being free of student loan debt. Psychologically, you just feel freer in general. And, you're in a high paying field in general where you'll be able to make up that time. So you can't really mess it up, So anyhow, I hope that helps. Mike, any last words for the audience here before we wrap things up?
I just want to applaud you and thank you for all you're doing, man. This is a lot of fun. Congratulations for all your success.
Yeah, so there's links in the chat there. Please subscribe to Mike's channel. Pick up his book, One Rental at a Time, and mine as well. Would appreciate it. And we will check you out next time. All right. Thanks, guys.